When Eleanor Martin passed away at 92, her family gathered, expecting little more than memories, maybe a photo album or two, and a few pieces of antique furniture. But when the lawyer read the will, everything changed, because Eleanor had left her grandson Josh exactly $5, and what seemed like a cruel joke at first turned out to be the beginning of something no one in the family could have imagined. This wasn't about the money. It was a treasure map, and the price of what it led to, absolutely priceless. Josh Martin sat stiffly in the polished mahogany chair of the law office, eyes still red from the funeral. Next to him sat his mother, his aunt, and his cousin. All of them were quiet as the attorney unfolded the final will and testament of Eleanor Martin, a beloved grandmother and the undisputed matriarch of the Martin family. The room held its breath. "To my daughter Margaret," the lawyer began, "I leave the family home." Margaret nodded, tears in her eyes. "To my niece Emily, I leave my jewelry box and everything inside it." Emily smiled faintly. "And to my grandson Joshua." The lawyer paused, looking over the top of his glasses. "I leave $5 in cash, located in the top drawer of my old sewing table." Josh's mouth dropped. "Wait, what?" The lawyer simply nodded. "That's what it says. $5, nothing more. No explanation." The family turned toward Josh in awkward silence. Aunt Margaret gave a pitying smile. "Maybe she meant to give you more and forgot," Emily whispered. "Did you do something to make her mad?" Josh sat there stunned. His grandmother had helped raise him. They had been close, or at least he thought they were. And now, just $5. That night, Josh couldn't sleep. He tossed and turned, staring at the ceiling. Why would she do that? He remembered her voice, always warm, always firm. "There's more to life than what's written on paper, Josh. The real stories are in the details." At 2 a.m., he made a decision. He got in his car, drove to her house, and unlocked the front door one last time. The sewing table was still there in her room, the same one that had sat by the window for decades. Josh opened the top drawer. Inside was an envelope. He opened it. Inside was a $5 bill and a note. "Josh, this $5 isn't about the money. It's the beginning of a journey, one you were always meant to take. Start by going to the place where I told you your stories mattered. Love, Grandma." Josh stared at the words. A memory stirred. His 5th grade graduation. She had taken him to an old diner. Over milkshakes, he'd told her he wanted to be a writer someday, and she had smiled and said, "Your stories matter. Don't forget that." The diner. Was that what she meant? Josh grabbed the bill, the note, and his keys. The journey had just begun. The bell above the door jingled. As Josh stepped into Millie's diner, the place where he and Grandma Eleanor had shared milkshakes and dreams. It hadn't changed in years. Same checkered floor, same faded booths, and the same sweet scent of waffles and grease. He slid into the booth near the window, their booth. For a moment, he sat there quietly listening to the hum of early morning chatter. Then he pulled out the note again. "Start by going to the place where I told you your stories mattered." This was it. No doubt. He flagged down the waitress, Millie herself, now in her 70s, but still sharp as ever. "Millie," Josh said, "I know this is going to sound weird, but did my grandma leave anything here for me?" Millie blinked. Then her eyes softened. "Josh Martin." He nodded. She reached into her apron pocket and pulled out a small envelope. "Your grandmother came in here a few months ago. Said you might stop by one day." Josh took the envelope, heart pounding. Inside was a handwritten note. "Stories live forever, but sometimes we forget where they began. Go to the library. Check the 3rd shelf in the children's section, where your first story was shelved." Josh's eyes widened. Years ago, for a school contest, he'd written a short story that had been displayed at the town library. Grandma had been so proud. She made him pose for pictures, like he'd just published a best-selling novel. He never forgot the way she'd beamed. At the library, Josh found the children's section empty and peaceful. He scanned the shelves until he found it the third one down. Tucked between two brightly colored books was a small brown journal with a gold ribbon tied around it. He opened it. Inside was a photo of him and Grandma seated at the diner booth and a second $5 bill. Underneath a short message, "You always had a gift. Remember that." The next clue waits where we walked the long road home. Josh sat back stunned. She hadn't just left him a message. She was leading him on a journey through memory, through their shared story. And somehow, it felt like she was still here. He thought hard. The long road home. Then it hit him, the park trail that ran behind their neighborhood. They used to walk it every Saturday, rain or shine. He'd collect sticks and make up stories, and she'd listen like they were worth gold. The last time they walked it, she'd asked him something he never forgot. "What kind of man do you want to become?" He hadn't known then. Maybe now, finally, he'd find out. Josh headed straight to the park. The sun was setting, casting golden light on the gravel path. He walked slowly, eyes scanning the trees. Halfway down the trail where the old oak tree stood, he saw it, a small metal box, nailed to the trunk, almost hidden in the ivy. Inside was another envelope, another $5 bill, and another message. "Good. You remember. Now go back to the beginning. The place where your mother told you the truth about your father." Josh's heart skipped. That was a memory he hadn't thought about in years. He was 7. Grandma had taken him to the old bus station after school, and that was where his mother had told him the truth. His dad had left, not because he had to, but because he wanted to. Josh had cried all the way home, but Grandma had hugged him tight and whispered, "That doesn't mean you're not worth staying for." Josh climbed into his car and headed for the old Greyhound station. It was mostly closed now, just a historical marker, with benches where people rarely sat. As he walked toward the platform, something caught his eye. Under a bench, a small blue envelope taped underneath. He pulled it free and opened it. Inside, another $5 bill and a letter, this one longer. "Sometimes the people who are supposed to stay leave, but you never did. You stayed with me. You made an old woman's world bigger with your words, your laughter, your stubborn kindness. You thought you didn't matter, but you were my everything." Josh's throat tightened. Tears welled. "One more step, darling. Go to the attic, the very back. You'll find the truth waiting there." Josh stood at the bottom of the narrow staircase, staring up at the attic door in his grandmother's old house. The house felt colder now, emptier. The hum of her old wall clock echoed in the silence. He hadn't been in the attic since he was a kid, back when he'd pretended it was a pirate's hideout, and Grandma had let him hunt for treasure up there while she folded laundry. He pulled the cord. The stairs creaked down slowly. Dust swirled in the beam of sunlight, streaming from the small window above. With a deep breath, he climbed up. The attic was just as he remembered: boxes, old books, forgotten Christmas decorations, and in the very back, behind a stack of faded quilts, was a small wooden chest. It had his name etched on it, Joshua. He knelt down, heart pounding, and opened the lid. Inside was a leather-bound notebook, a bundle of envelopes, and a tin box with a familiar $5 bill sitting on top. He picked up the notebook first. It was a journal. Grandma Eleanor's handwriting filled every page. Josh was quiet today. He didn't say much after school, but I saw the way he looked at the other kids being picked up by their dads. He got an A+ on his English paper. I told him he's got a gift. He smiled so big. I hope the world never tells him otherwise. He said he wants to be a writer. I told him stories can change the world. Josh sat there stunned. The entire journal, cover to cover, was about him, his childhood, his milestones, his heartbreaks, his dreams. She'd been watching, recording, loving him through every stage, even the ones he thought no one noticed. He opened the tin box next. It was filled with little trinkets, items he'd long forgotten, but she had saved. His first library card, a tiny plastic dinosaur he once insisted was his writing assistant, a ticket stub from the first movie they saw together, a photo of him asleep on her shoulder with a crayon in his hand, and under it all, a folded note with a final message. You thought the $5 was a joke, but it was a breadcrumb, a trail, a story. Because you're a storyteller, Josh, and I knew the only way you'd follow your heart was if I gave you a mystery to solve. Josh's hands shook as he opened the final envelope, another $5 bill, and a letter. This time it was addressed to the man you've become. If you've made it this far, it means you're ready. Ready to let go of the anger. Ready to see that your story matters, not just to me, but to others. So here's my real gift. Downstairs in the study closet is a manuscript. Your manuscript? The one you started in high school. I finished editing it. I printed it. I sent it to someone I trust, and they want to publish it. Josh's breath caught in his throat. You are an author now, sweetheart. And the world is ready for your words. The $5 was just the start. But your voice, that was always the treasure. He rushed down the stairs, flung open the closet door in the study. There it was, a binder neatly labeled, The Boy Who Stayed, by Joshua Martin, edited and annotated by Eleanor Martin. Next to it was a business card, a publishing company, and on the back handwritten, We love this voice. When can we talk? Josh sank to the floor, overwhelmed. This woman, this extraordinary woman, she hadn't just left him a trail. She had launched his dream, not with millions of dollars, not with legal instructions, but with $5 bills and unwavering belief. In that moment he realized the $5 wasn't meant to give him wealth. It was meant to give him direction, and that was priceless. Josh sat at his old childhood desk, grandma's binder, open in front of him, the edges worn, the ink slightly smudged. He could see her notes in the margins, neat cursive blue ink. Expand this thought. Beautiful sentence. Your voice shines here. It felt like she was right there beside him, coaching him, believing in him, like always. But there was something terrifying about seeing it all printed. His words, his pain, his truth. He picked up the business card again, the publishing company she'd contacted. He wasn't sure what Grandma had said to them, but whatever it was, it had been enough. He took a deep breath and called the number. A warm voice answered. Hello, this is Caroline at Crestleaf Publishing. Josh cleared his throat. Hi. My name is Josh Martin. I think you might have read a manuscript from my grandmother, Eleanor Martin. There was a pause, then excitement. Oh my gosh, Josh. Yes, your grandmother sent us your story months ago. We've been hoping to hear from you. Josh blinked. She did. She wrote the most beautiful letter about you. Said you were a born storyteller, afraid to believe it. We loved the manuscript, Josh. We want to publish it. Josh felt like the wind had been knocked out of him. But I'm just a guy who fixes printers in a basement office. I've never been published. I don't even have a degree in writing. Caroline chuckled kindly. Well, your story doesn't care about your resume. It just needs to be heard. And your grandma, she made sure we listened. Josh hung up the phone and sat in silence for a long time. The doubt was loud, but Grandma's belief, it was louder. Over the next few weeks, things moved fast. Edits, phone calls, emails. Josh signed his first book deal. The title would stay the same, The Boy Who Stayed. But now on the dedication page, he added, For Grandma Eleanor. You taught me that $5 can buy courage, and a story can change a life. The day the announcement went public, Josh's inbox exploded. Old friends, teachers, strangers, all saying the same thing. I remember how you always wrote stories in class. Your grandmother would be so proud. This gave me chills. I can't wait to read it. One message stood out. It was from a man named David Mathers. Josh didn't recognize the name, but the message read, "Your grandmother once gave me a meal when I was homeless and a copy of one of your stories. She said, 'This boy is going to matter.' I still have that paper. And now, I see you do." Josh stared at the screen. It wasn't just about her faith in him. It was about her faith in goodness and how she spread that faith to others. A week later, the publisher asked him to do a small reading at the local bookstore. He almost said no, but then he remembered how she used to say, "The world needs your words, even if your voice shakes." He stood nervously in front of 20 folding chairs all filled. He opened the book, began to read, and when he reached the part in the story where the main character finds a letter from his grandmother, he had to stop and breathe, because in that moment, he wasn't just reading fiction. He was reading his life, and everyone in that room could feel it. When he finished, there was silence, then applause. Someone in the back stood, and then everyone else followed. A standing ovation for the boy who'd once believed he didn't matter, and the grandmother who had always known he did. That night, as he walked home under the stars, Josh reached into his pocket. He carried that same $5 bill everywhere, now creased and worn, wrapped in the last note she ever wrote. He smiled up at the sky. "Thank you, Grandma," he whispered. "You gave me everything." A month after the bookstore reading, Josh received a letter in the mail. A real letter. No return address. Just his name handwritten in cursive. The ink slightly faded. He opened it curiously. Inside was a formal document from the Bright Futures Youth Foundation, a nonprofit he'd never heard of, and a short note. "Dear Mr. Martin, we are writing to thank you for your recent legacy donation, made in your name, by Ms. Eleanor Martin. The funds have helped us provide writing supplies, journals, and mentorship programs for underserved youth in 3 school districts." Josh's heart jumped. His name. His grandma had donated on his behalf. There was more. In accordance with Ms. Martin's wishes, the writing corner in our new community library will be dedicated as the Josh Martin Storytelling Space. Because every kid has a story. He sat back stunned. Tears formed at the edges of his eyes. She hadn't just believed in his voice. She believed in the voices of every kid like him. The quiet ones, the overlooked ones, the ones carrying stories they were too scared to tell. Later that day, Josh drove to the address listed in the letter. It was a modest, colorful community center in a part of town he rarely visited. Inside, he found a cheerful librarian showing a group of kids how to fold storybooks out of printer paper. On one wall, freshly painted in bright blue and yellow, was a sign, "The Josh Martin Storytelling Space." Because every kid has a story. Josh approached the librarian. "Hi, I'm Josh." She blinked. "The Josh." He nodded sheepishly. A few of the kids looked over, curious. The librarian smiled. "Your grandmother was a miracle. She came here last spring, told us about her grandson, and said, 'One day this place will carry his name.' And here you are." One little girl walked up shyly and held out a drawing. It showed a stick figure holding a pencil, standing next to an older woman with gray hair. Underneath it said, "I want to be like him." And, like his grandma, Josh couldn't hold back the tears anymore. He crouched down and whispered, "You already are." Back at home, he sat in Grandma's favorite chair. In his lap, the final $5 bill from the attic. It was no longer just a keepsake. It was a key to a future built on legacy and love. He opened his laptop and began a new story. This one about a boy and his grandmother. A trail of clues, a quiet inheritance, and a voice that finally learned to speak. He titled it, $5 and a Voice. A week later, Josh received another message, this time from a high school teacher who had seen the news coverage of his book. "Would you come speak to our students about storytelling and courage? Most of them don't believe they matter, but maybe they'll believe you." Josh hesitated at first. Then he said yes, because somewhere out there, Another kid was carrying a story in silence, and now Josh had the chance to be the person his grandma had been for him. Before he left for the school, he reached into his wallet. He pulled out a $5 bill, clean and crisp, and wrote on the margin in tiny letters, "Your story matters." He slid it into his pocket, just in case. Josh walked through the doors of Oak Hill High School for the first time in over a decade. The smell of waxed hallways and cafeteria pizza hit him like a memory bomb. He was no longer the quiet kid in the back row, scribbling stories in a spiral notebook. Today he was the guest speaker, and it scared him more than anything. The front office secretary, Mrs. Green, still there, still wearing the same chunky glasses, greeted him with surprise. "Josh Martin." "Well, look at you, Tommies. I remember when you broke the library printer in 10th grade and nearly cried." Josh laughed, rubbing the back of his neck. "Yeah, that sounds about right." She guided him down the hall to the auditorium. As he passed rows of lockers, he spotted a group of students slouched against the wall, one of them sketching in the margins of a math book. Josh paused. He knew that look, the "I don't fit in here" look. He'd worn it for years. The auditorium wasn't full, maybe 50 students. Some clearly didn't want to be there. Some scrolled on their phones, but others, especially the quiet ones in the back, looked up as Josh stepped on stage. He took a deep breath and began. "I was like a lot of you. Quiet, unsure, not great at sports, kinda bad at math. But I had a grandma who told me something I didn't believe for a long time, that my story mattered." A few heads turned. "I'm not here to sell you a book. I'm here because someone once believed in me more than I believed in myself. And because of that, my life changed." He pulled something from his pocket, a $5 bill. He held it up. "This is all my grandma left me in her will. Just this, $5. But what she gave me was worth more than any inheritance." Now every head was up. He told them the whole story, following the clues, finding the attic letters, the journal, the secret donation. He even read a passage from The Boy Who Stayed. And by the end, even the phone scrollers were watching. Afterward, students lined up to talk. Some shyly asked for a photo. Others just said thanks. But one boy stayed behind, alone. He looked about 14, hoodie pulled over his head, eyes down. Josh approached him. "You good?" The boy nodded slowly, then reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "I wrote something I never showed anyone." Josh unfolded it. It was a poem. Raw, honest, beautiful. Josh smiled. "This is powerful. Really powerful." The boy looked up just slightly. "You think so?" Josh reached into his wallet, pulled out the crisp $5 bill he'd brought that morning, the one with "Your story matters" written in the margin. He handed it to the boy. "She gave this to me in a way. I want you to have it." The boy's hands trembled as he took it. "You're not alone," Josh said. "Keep writing." As Josh walked out of the school, he felt something lift. This was why she'd done it. Not just to help him write a book, but to live the story, to carry her torch and pass it to someone else. That night, Josh opened Grandma's journal again. He added his own entry in the back, in his handwriting. "I gave away the $5 bill today, Grandma, to someone who needed it more than I did. I think you'd be proud." It was a rainy Saturday when Josh received a call from Margaret, his mother's cousin, and the executor of Grandma Eleanor's estate. "Hey, Josh," she said. "I've been cleaning out the attic. Figured I'd sort what was left. I found something, and I think it's meant for you." Josh's stomach turned with curiosity. "Another envelope?" he asked. "Not exactly," Margaret replied. "It's a tape, an old cassette tape, with your name on it." An hour later, Josh stood in Margaret's garage, holding the dusty plastic cassette in his hand. Written in faded ink on the label were the words, "For Josh. Play this when you're ready to hear my voice again." Josh swallowed hard. He hadn't heard her voice since the funeral, hadn't even considered that she might have recorded something. Margaret handed him a clunky gray cassette player she'd dug out from a closet. "Still works," she said with a small smile. Josh thanked her, tucked the player under his arm, and headed home. That night, he sat in Grandma's chair, her knitted blanket draped over the back. Like it always was, he took a deep breath, slid the cassette into the player, and pressed play. There was a soft click, and then her voice. "Hello, my darling boy." Josh's breath caught. She sounded alive, warm, smiling, just like he remembered. If you're hearing this, then you've followed the clues, you found the stories, and I hope by now you believe what I've always known. You were born to write, Josh. But more than that, you were born to love. Josh pressed a hand to his mouth. Tears welled instantly. "I know life hasn't always been fair to you. And I know I couldn't protect you from every hurt. But I tried to plant seeds. I hope they've grown." Every $5 bill was a stepping stone, sweetheart. Not to money, to meaning. I kept all your stories, you know. Every scrap, every journal, every wild tale about pirate rabbits and talking trees. I didn't keep them because they were polished. I kept them because they were yours. Josh laughed through the tears. He remembered the pirate rabbit saga. It had gone on for 6 whole pages. And here's the last gift. One I didn't put in a box or a letter. It's this moment, right now. You sitting there, listening, knowing that I believed in you with every breath I had left. Because I knew one day you'd believe in yourself too. And when you do, don't stop there. Find the ones who don't know yet and pass the $5 on. The tape ended with a quiet pause. Then her voice softer. I love you, Josh. Always. Now go write a story someone needs. Click. Silence. Josh didn't move for a long time. He sat in the chair, tape player in his lap, tears running freely. The house felt full again, like she was sitting across from him, nodding in approval. He stood up, walked to his bookshelf, and placed the cassette carefully between 2 leather journals. Then, as if guided by something larger than himself, he opened his laptop and began to type. Not a story this time, but a letter. Dear you. Maybe no one's ever told you this before. Maybe the world's been loud and cruel and confusing. But there is something I want you to know. Your story matters. Your voice matters. And someone right now is waiting for you to share it. So here's $5 and a promise. The next clue is yours to find. He folded the letter, attached a crisp $5 bill, and slipped it into an envelope labeled, To whoever needs this most. He didn't know who would find it, but he knew they would, just like he had. Weeks passed. The book launched. Reviews came in. Readers called it heartfelt, raw, healing. But Josh wasn't chasing bestseller lists. He was chasing meaning. Each email from a quiet teen, each letter from a struggling writer, each tearful handshake at a signing event, these were the treasures. And with every story he heard, he saw Grandma's fingerprints on everything. One Saturday after a school visit in a small town, Josh stepped outside to find a boy waiting on the library steps, awkward, freckled, holding something in his hand. I read your book, the boy said softly. Josh smiled. Yeah, what did you think? The boy didn't answer right away. Then he held out a crumpled envelope. I found this taped under a bench in the park, he whispered. It had $5 and a note inside. Josh's eyes widened. The boy handed it to him. Josh unfolded it. It was his handwriting, the letter he'd written, to whoever needs this most. I think, the boy said shyly, I was supposed to find it. Josh knelt down and placed a hand on the boy's shoulder. I think so too. From that day on, Josh made it a tradition. Every time he visited a new city, a school, a church, a library, he'd leave behind a $5 bill, folded in a letter, hidden in places where stories sleep, sometimes under benches, sometimes between books, sometimes taped to the inside of a locker door. The notes always said something different, but the message was the same. You matter. Your voice has power. Keep going. Years later, a news story would ripple through the internet. Dozens of people posting photos of mysterious $5 bills found in unexpected places with handwritten messages that sparked something in them. They called it the $5 legacy. But Josh didn't claim it. He never said a word. He just smiled, because the real author of that movement had once tucked a $5 bill into his world and taught him how to believe. On the anniversary of Grandma Eleanor's passing, Josh returned to her grave. The sky was clear, the breeze gentle. He laid a bouquet of lilacs, her favorite, and pulled a folded envelope from his coat pocket. He placed it against the headstone. To Eleanor Martin, thank you for every dollar, for every word, for making me the man who now believes he was never small, and for showing me that the most priceless gift is belief. I love you, always. He stood up and looked around. The cemetery was quiet, except for a girl nearby reading aloud under a tree. Her voice carried in the wind, soft, hopeful. Josh smiled, because he knew the story would keep going. Not just because of the book, not even because of the letters, but because one woman believed in planting stories instead of seeds, and they were still blooming. If this story moved you, if you believe in the power of small acts of stories that matter, of voices that need to be heard, then don't just watch. Be part of the legacy. Subscribe for more stories that will stay with you. Leave a comment and tell us who believed in you. Come back next time, because the next story could be yours.